Hotelier extraordinaire.
Thank you, Chris.
Take it right in the shorts, huh? Wow. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Frank Saitta. I teach here at the university. As a matter of fact, I see some of my students here, so some of you have heard this rap before, so I'm going to do my best to mix it up a little bit for you. So let's talk about the elephant in the room right now. This weather sucks.
Right.
Oh, please. You want to be in Chicago?
I'm just telling you, it's hard to get up and do what you wanted to do today, right?
Extremely bipolar.
Goodness. But look at all of you who are here. You made it. You're professionals. You play through pain. How many people woke up within the last hour? Yeah, dig honesty. Right, so you're a good napper, I take it. Right? How many other people are good nappers? Man, we're lucky. I can't nap. I'm not a good napper. It's not. I fall into a deep REM sleep and then I wake up like it's like waking up in the morning, disoriented, and cranky, and I don't want to do anything. But everybody else who hasn't napped, right? They're all perky and they're productive and they want to do stuff, and I'm just So, I'm here to talk to you guys about this business. So, everybody in here has some kind of an interest in the hospitality industry. Yeah. It didn't start out that way. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happened to me, how I got into this business. I'm going to throw a little bit of some lessons I've learned along the way, and I'll open it up for some questions if I have time. And, I'll try to stay on topic. It's not always easy for me. Disclaimer, I usually put it up on the board, but there's a chance I might use some adult language. I might talk about some adult situations, so I'm hoping this is a mature audience and you guys can handle all that stuff. So think of this like the beginning of something you're streaming, and that disclaimer comes up, AL, AS, MA.
I'll be back in about an hour.
Chris, not to worry, I got this. So if you don't come to class, you're going to take it in the shorts. So here's what was going on with me. I grew up in New York. I grew up in Brooklyn, and it was much different than it is today. And I played baseball, right? That was my thing. I was going to play baseball. It was all state, all city. And I signed a letter of intent to go to a university to play baseball. And I went on recruiting trips, and that's all I thought I was going to do. That was it. And in the spring of my senior year, I tore a ligament in my elbow. Today, they would fix it with something called Tommy John surgery, which they do all the time. But in 1978, it was an elective surgery, and they certainly weren't doing it on 17-year-olds. And so it was kind of bye-bye baseball. Or at least I got a letter from the university I was going to, and they said, you're a good kid, we'd love to have you come here, but we're not going to pay for it. So I didn't want to go out to Ohio and not play baseball and just be in Ohio. I was a little bit of a New Yorker, and anything west of the Hudson River was kind of suspect anyway. So now I had to think about, my parents were like, well, you're going to college. And I had to, right? Because it's not like I could fix shit. And I didn't have any mechanical aptitude, so it wasn't like I was going to be a welder or a trade or anything like that, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I just didn't have those skill sets. So I went to my guidance counselor, Mrs. Saitta, and I shared with her my dilemma, and she says, well, let's take a look at that aptitude test you took in 8th grade, right? And so hotel management came up on that. And, you know, I thought for a moment, I said, well, I like hotels. I've always had a good time when we went to a hotel. I had done some traveling for baseball, and hotels were fun, right? You know. I said, okay. And then I got real practical. Thought, how much math or science can be in hotel management? And so I said, okay, it's hotel motel for me. I'm all in. Let's go. Let's find schools. So I was like a solid 2-4 student. I went to class, and there were some classes I really liked and I did really well in, but if I wasn't interested in the class, so let's say like, trigonometry or some of the other math or sciences, I didn't perform well because I wasn't interested. As the teachers would say, if he would only apply himself, right? And so, which makes me think of a story. So I must have been in like 7th or 8th grade, and my parents went up to one of those parent-teacher nights, right? Do they still do that? At least they did when my daughter was going through school, right? And so, where your parents get to talk to your teachers, and that all stops now, right? You guys have the power. Your parents can't talk to your teachers unless you let them. So they go up, and I'm, sitting on the couch when they come home, and my dad comes in, and he smacks me on the back of the head. He goes, "Hey, sit up, jackass," because that's what he called me. He wanted to get my attention. He said, "So I talked to all your teachers, or at least enough of them for my sake." He said, "They all said a lot of the same things." And I said, "Oh, okay. What?" And he said, "Well, they all said you're popular." And I said, "Well, that's a good thing." He said, "Well, not really." He said, "An orangutan could go to school and be popular." I said, "Oh." And then he said, "They all said you have a lot of potential." And he said, "Let's just get this straight. Potential, my definition of potential just is that you're not worth a shit to me right now." Right? And so I didn't really think a lot about that. I kind of just brushed it aside as saying my dad's just being my dad, right? Because that's a lot of the times what we do. Like, he's just being, he was also, "Hey, put some dirt on it," or "Hey, take a shower, you'll feel better," But I never put any weight on that statement. And so for a good part of my life, there was always a lot of people who would say, "Hey, this kid's got potential," right? Anybody here been told you have potential, right? And so that feels good, right? When people say you have potential. And so I banked and lived on that potential for a very long time. But I never responded to anybody who said that to me. And when people tell you that means they care about you, right? They see something in you and they care about you. So the next time, and I'm telling you all that you all have tremendous potential, but you need to ask yourself this question the next time or now: what can I be doing in order to achieve this potential or get closer to realizing what my potential is, as opposed to sitting back and going, I have this self-knowledge now, I'm self-aware that I have potential, and do nothing about it. Because that's what I did for a very long time. Because you may wake up one day and be 50 years old, and trust me, 50-year-olds don't really, people aren't walking up to a 50-year-old and saying, "Hey, you got a lot of potential." You got a lot of potential in 40 years that you're probably going to die. But You know, other than that, you know, that potential statement, you hear it less and less and less. You should be hearing it a lot now. So you should also be saying to yourself, what can I do with this potential? What can I be thinking about? What questions can I be asking? And it doesn't mean that you have to know what you want to do with yourself either. So when somebody says you have a lot of potential, you can ask them questions and say, tell me more about what you mean by that. Or what sort of potential do you see in me? And how can I achieve some of this potential that you're talking about? Right? Because if somebody's saying that to you, the person that's saying that to you, they care about you. And they want to see you move to the next step or get to that next place in whatever success looks like. So you have a responsibility to yourself to not just go, woo, I am a potential full person. What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that information? It's like anything else, right? You go to the doctor, and the doctor says, hey, you got strep throat. He's just giving you some information, and you're going to do something with that information, right? You're going to, whatever, go buy Cepacol, or he's going to give you a script, and you're going to take your meds and do whatever. It's the same thing when somebody tells you you have potential. You're going to do something with that information. So I digress. So I didn't have great grades, and so I wasn't able to get into, and in 1978, there wasn't a ton of schools that had a hospitality or a hotel management program. So I didn't have grades to get into a Cornell or to a University of Michigan, and I didn't want to go to Arizona or UNLV. But we found Niagara University, and so I went to Niagara University in Niagara Falls, New York. And they had a good hospitality and hotel management program. And so I was on my way, or so I thought. And I got to Niagara, and I got through my gen ed classes in my freshman year, and much like you guys, a lot of you, I had a class, I forget what it was, like intro to hospitality or something along those lines, that I had an adjunct instructor who happened to be the general manager at the Niagara Falls Hilton. And after class, you know, he pulled me aside and said, hey, you really seem to enjoy this class. You're engaged, you ask questions, he said, let me ask you, have you ever worked in a hotel? I said, no. He said, well, so you don't even know if you like this business. I said, no. I said, I grew up in the restaurant business. I could tell you I don't like that business, right? My grandfather owned restaurants in New York, and I was the worst bus boy, water and butter boy ever. I just hated it, right? There was just something about the smell of the back of a house. And it doesn't matter, every restaurant I've been in the back of the house, whether it's fine dining or short order, they just all had, there's a smell. Maybe it's the combination of the smells and the cleaning stuff. I don't know. You know, my grandfather was an old school restaurateur, you know, and we've all probably heard it if you've worked in a restaurant. You know, he's like, Frankie boy, if you got time to lean, you got time to clean. And you know, so there's always something to do, and you know, the cooks and the chefs, they all had attitude, and I was working in his restaurant, so even the waiters and servers and everybody gave me shit. So I knew I didn't want to do that. So that summer, I went and got a job, and I worked at a hotel in Manhattan called the Mayflower Hotel. And it was awesome. This hotel was on Central Park West, and it just had an inordinate amount of famous people and celebrities, and a lot of them were living there. Robert De Niro was living there. Martin Scorsese, they were filming a movie, The King of Comedy, and Jerry Lewis was there, and Amy Irving, these are old celebrities, Roberto Duran, the boxer, and a host of others. We had a contract with Good Morning America. So if you were going to be on Good Morning America the following morning, you stayed with us the night before. And so I worked at the front desk. And anybody here ever worked at a front desk? Right? Kind of, sort of. So you know, the desk itself, right, is kind of like a stage. And you know, we had the recessed can lighting, and it would shine down. And these people, everybody was asking me for information, and I was making change, and you know, checking people in and checking people out, and I knew the neighborhood, and so I was like, I'm in. This is the shit. I love this job. I mean, I immediately found the nobility in the work, right? I knew that this was something I liked to do. I didn't mind being on my feet for 8 hours. You know, there was time to sit in the back from time to time. I enjoyed helping others when they came to town. Most of the time they were there for a good time. You know, I didn't encounter, you know, we always seemed to talk about, you know, the small percentage of guests who are an absolute disaster, who are rude, and we focus on those, but not the ones who are a delight and you're happy to help. I was fortunate. I was able to find the nobility in that work. And so I was in. I went back to school that next semester, and I told that guy, I was like, man, I worked in a hotel and it was awesome. I had a great summer. This is what I want to do. And he was great. And he says, great. And that was that. That was the best advice I got, was go work in a hotel. Then the next summer I worked in another hotel, working in the reservations department, which was a little less glamorous. But again, it was still, I was at another nice hotel, and you know, the phone was always ringing, and there were always people to, and I got to work with a different type of person, you know, people who sat in the reservations office and sat all the time. These were sort of the offensive linemen, if you will, of the hotel. Not like the offensive lineman like housekeeping is, but these were really behind the scenes people. And I had already had time in the show, you know, so it was great. And I did that again another summer, and so I got through school. And then when I got out of school, I took a little time off, because, you know, school is stressful, guys. You know, you're in for a stressful ride, right? It's gonna be tough on you. So I needed to take a few months off and spend a lot of time at the beach and drink a lot of beer, smoke a lot of dope. I mean, you know, these were the things I had to do, you know, in order to unwind from 4 grueling years of hotel management school. You know, there's also this misnomer, and I'm not going to tell your parents either, right, that, you know, college students don't get enough sleep, right? But I won't tell on you, right? Because I slept more when I was in college than I slept when I was at home. I'm going to tell you that. Maybe it's just me, but I don't know. I worked. I had a job. I was in school in Buffalo, basically. I delivered pizza and wings, right? And people would order wings by, like, you know, we sold them by 25 or 50 or 100 wings at a time. There's a lot of people who got 48 wings and 47 wings. You know, they didn't care. I was selling them to baby college students anyway. It wasn't like they were sitting there counting them. So pizza was harder, right? You couldn't give them a piece of pie with a slice missing. You know? You couldn't do that. So after about 3 months, you know, I got the call. I was living in the city, and Mom and Dad were in upstate New York. And like, hey, you can do something here? You know. And I said, yes, because my grandmother had given me 6 months rent free in her apartment in Brooklyn. She had remarried, my grandmother remarried, which is a whole another, and this won't be on any sort of a quiz or test or anything. She remarried, and she married a guy who lived in Florida like most of the year, and so she was down in Florida. The apartment was just sitting there, so So then, in order to get work, there wasn't like job posting sites, there was no H Careers or Indeed or anything like that. So you printed up a ton of your resumes and a ton of cover letters, and you did like a direct mailing, right? And so that's what I did, and I got a call. Somebody called me, and I got a job. And I was the sales manager for Leona Helmsley in New York, and I was the sales manager for all of her New York properties. I had no business. You know, sometimes we walk around with this, what I call the imposter syndrome. Like, I hope nobody asks me if I really know what I'm doing, because I don't. I'm an imposter. And, you know, because there's no training back then. There were no sales programs or any sales training we went to. My first day at work, you know, I met the people I was working with, and then my director of sales said, okay, see that building down there? I want you to go to the top of it, get in the elevator, go to the top of it, knock on every door, and tell them that you have a $91 rate to sell at these hotels. And here's a little spiel you can come up with, and that's what I did. I just knocked on doors and started talking to receptionists and said things like, hey, do you guys ever bring anybody into town? Oh, you do? Well, do they stay in hotels when they come? Oh, they do? Well, look, I represent these hotels, and we'd like to offer you and your travelers a $91 rate. Does that sound good? It does? Well, here, sign this, right? And that's what I did for a couple of years, and it was awesome. I had a great salary, $13,500 in 1982, and I was living like a king, you know. It was great. I went out immediately and bought a gold-toned Walkman, big Porsche sunglasses, full-length leather coat. Yeah. It was the disco age, you know, that was still going on. So we were going to clubs like the China Club and, of course, Studio 54, and it was awesome. And I did that for 2 years and then became the night manager of that hotel, learned a lot about the hotel business. And then I got to open up a hotel in New York, the Marriott Marquis. You guys see that hotel? I was the opening manager on duty at that hotel. You see it every New Year's Eve. Dick Clark's rockin' New Year's Eve. That's the big concrete monolith right in the middle of Times Square. Now, when we opened it in 1985, Times Square was not at all like it is today, right? So maybe some of you on HBO saw that show, The Deuce. Times Square was like Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, it was not a nice neighborhood, but somebody had a vision that they were going to take Times Square and turn it into a tourist attraction. Well, we were like the second hotel to open up there. A hotel called Novotel was the first, and then there was us. I mean, the neighborhood was so bad that our first New Year's Eve there, now we're right in Times Square. I mean, the celebration is there. But we told our guests, look, here's the deal. We're going to lock the doors at 10 o'clock at night, and we're not going to open them up again till 3 in the morning. So you decide. We're going to throw fabulous parties in the hotel. There's going to be meeting rooms, different levels of parties. You know, we got our gold, bronze, platinum party. So you can stay in here and have a great time. Or if you decide you want to go out, just know 10 o'clock, the doors get locked. You don't get back in until 3 a.m. Because we did not want to deal with any of the shit that was going on the streets. That was all we knew what to do. We didn't know anything else to do. But I've learned a ton. Marriott was good to us. And they transferred me to Chicago. And then I got to work in some other hotels. I worked in another one of their hotels as a front office manager. Then I worked for Hyatt as a front office manager. And then I wanted to get back into sales. Oh, I should show the timeline. Then I got to work in sales for an independent hotel in Chicago. Then I started working, I opened this hotel in Schaumburg, Illinois, called the Homewood Suites Hotel. It was the fifth of its type built. And was an extended stay hotel. So for those of you who continue to pursue your education in hospitality and lodging, you'll learn about extended stay hotels. And I did that for 4 years, and then I got a call from somebody in, of all places, Memphis, Tennessee. And they asked me if I wanted to talk to them about a job opening they had as a director of field marketing for Hampton Inns. I had heard of Hampton Inns, but I didn't know a ton about them. And so they flew me to Memphis. I talked to them. I interviewed with a whole bunch of people. They even sent me out in the afternoon with a real estate broker to see what Memphis was all about. And so moving to Memphis from Chicago is like, wow, buy this kind of house? This is awesome, out of brick. So that was a Thursday. On Sunday, I shook hands with these people over the phone and packed up the family. It was my wife. We had a 2-year-old little girl, and we came to Memphis. And so my job basically was to work with new owners, folks who were building a Hampton Inn, and get them squared away, set them up for success, and then monitor their performance for a few months. Let me tell you, that job took me to every little shithole town in this country. If there was a gas station, a Walmart, a little community college, somebody was putting a Hampton Inn there. So when I got there, there was about 400 Hamptons. And by the time I left, there was well over 1,000. I probably worked on 415, opened about 415 Hampton Inns myself. Learned a lot about sales and marketing, learned a lot about people. Job took me to every state in the continental United States. They then started opening up a brand of hotels called Hampton Inn and Suites, which was kind of a marriage between a Homewood Suites and a Hampton Inn, and because I had experience in both of those, they let me build the support organization, and I did that for a couple of years. And then I got to move over to Homewood, where I got to run that support organization, which ultimately became the support organization for the extended stay brands, which included Home2. And that's where I got to learn about managing people, managing high level, high caliber performing people. So when I got there, I had 2 direct reports, 2 directors, and when I left, I had 9. And that's where I learned about strength-based leadership. And that's where I learned about discovering the best in people, what they do best, and just focusing on that. So, for example, when we used to give our annual reviews, right? When we used to sit down with an employee and say, okay, let's talk about your work this last year. We used to spend so much time just talking about what they didn't do well. Like, here's where all your opportunities are, right? And these were typically areas where somebody just wasn't good at them, and no matter how much work we spent on it, they weren't going to be good at it, right? Instead of spending time saying, you know what, you are really strong at teaching people how to be excellent at customer service. So let's talk about how we take that strength and expand it, and how we can use it to benefit our entire organization and our customers. And that's what we started to do. And we started to work solely on people's strengths. If they had a weakness in an area, then we found somebody who was strong in that area, and those 2 people worked together, and they complemented one another. So I built this team of what I like to call the League of America. So I had people on my team who were really super strong in revenue management, customer service, local sales, driving revenue, and a host of other areas. And I got to deploy them wherever those superpowers and skills were needed. And we were a force to be reckoned with. Homewood won like 3 or 4 J.D. Power Awards in a row. Ended up, they're still winning them. We had owner satisfaction that was off the chain. Gallup organization ranked us, right below Lexus. And job satisfaction. We had tenure like none of the other brands out there. People wanted to come and work for Homewood because they wanted to dip their toe in our special sauce, if you will. And so the way we were doing business was adopted by all of the other brands. And we decided to call this method of supporting and consulting with other hotels, we decided to call this the trusted advisor method, right? So what that essentially meant as we were working with other people, right? Because our job was essentially this. I'd come to your hotel and I would say, this is the way it used to be done. I'd show up with a ton of reports, right? Customer satisfaction reports, maybe a quality assurance inspection, and I would say, look, here's all these reports, and I've highlighted all these areas where you're not doing great, and we need to work on this. And you would go, okay, and then I would say, let's work on an action plan together. And we'd work on an action plan, and we'd come up with some dates when you were gonna do stuff by. And at best, you would do 20 to 25% of that action plan, which in the big picture isn't terrible, right? But I just knew that we could do better than that. And so we started working with an outside consultant who brought to us this idea of gaining people's trust first, right? So if I asked you, outside of pork pie hats, what's your favorite food?
Chinese.
Chinese food, right? And so I learned this about you, and we decided we were working all morning, and I said, let's go to the place where you enjoy to have your favorite Chinese food, and I let you order for the table, and we didn't talk about business at all. I just got to know you a little bit better. There's a high chance, and I told you some things about myself, and maybe even I got a little vulnerable. There's a high chance we've started to build some trust in one another, so that when I start to ask you questions about your operation, you're probably going to tell me a little bit more than if we hadn't gone and spent that time getting to know one another. Instead of me just laying a bunch of reports on you and saying the reports say you need to do this, which at that point you're like, who is this guy from the corporate office telling me what I need to do here? He doesn't know what I'm dealing with here. On the other hand, if I spend time and I get to know you and I build a relationship and we establish it based on trust, yeah, I might be more willing to change my behaviors. And that's all consulting is, right? Is changing behaviors, which is hard. Hard. Anybody here ever tried to change a behavior? Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. It's the hardest thing to do because, first of all, the word change typically scares the daylights out of us, even when we know it's not good for us, right? Even when we know it's not good for us. So I did that gig for 12 years, and in 2014, I don't want to say I did everything I could do at Hilton, but I'd done enough. I'd done enough there, and it was time. After 20 years working for that organization, I was like, you know, there's other things I want to do. And one of them was I wanted to teach. And so I came here. I spoke to HR, I met with the dean, and I started teaching classes here. And it's super fulfilling because I want to let you guys in on a secret. I am a big fan of your generation, right? I am not one of those other folks who, what are they saying about you guys? Say what?
You use technology too much.
What else?
Sensitive.
Oh! What else? Lazy. What else?
Don't care enough.
Right. And you hear these things. What else?
Disrespectful is a word to use.
And you hear these things. And how does that make you feel?
Good.
What is that?
Not good.
No! I know. Right? So first of all, before I go any further, on behalf of my generation, I want to apologize to you because I want to take some responsibility for that, right? A good portion of my generation raised you. We were the ones who solved a lot of problems for you. We were the ones who went out and bought those participation trophies. We were the ones who bought you phones when you were 8 and 9 years old and gave you free Wi-Fi. So, you know, we should be and feel very responsible for some of those things, if at all we consider them bad things. So typically we say things, bad things about people, not because they're always bad, but because sometimes we're envious of them, and sometimes because we don't understand, nor do we seek to understand. I've been working with students now your age for 5 years. I think you're terrific. I find you to be very respectful. I don't find you to be too technology laden or dependent. And by the way, what's wrong with that? That's what it's there for. We've got people out there developing all of this technology. Somebody needs to be using it. There's barriers, right? We have to understand that, every time, a message goes off, or you get another like, or you get another something coming through, and you look at it, right? You all understand. You get a little ding of dopamine and a little hit of serotonin, right? Right? You know that. Okay, so you know what you're dealing with, right? So when we constantly get hit with serotonin and dopamine, anybody know what serotonin is?
Is that around the pleasure chemical?
Right on. Yes. Yes, it's the happy chemical in our head. Makes us feel good. There's lots of ways to get serotonin. That's why people drink too much. It's why they smoke. It's why they take opiates in excess, right? So as long as you know what you're dealing with when it comes to these things, right, that these are serotonin vehicles to a certain extent, then you're okay. So you know what your job is then, right? You have to disrupt that thinking. And those of you who have been in one of my classes already, this is what I talked about the first day, so you know this. Your job is to disrupt that thinking. And that's by just doing the right thing, showing up, acting concerned, being concerned. You're not too cool for school. I can't stand hipsters either. I grew up in Brooklyn. I don't like what they've done to Brooklyn. Hipsters have ruined it. Now nobody can live there but, rich, ridiculous people who are walking around wearing skinny jeans and not shaving, and, it's all screwed up. So, are listening to music that they really don't like, but want to say they like it just so that they can walk around and go, man, I heard what Bad Bunny just dropped and I dig it. You don't even understand what he's saying. I know it because you're not Puerto Rican. So, your job is to disrupt the thinking. That's all you have to do. And you're not any different than any other generation. I'm sorry to tell you, you're not terminally unique. Okay? So when I was in school, when I was in college, my hair was as long as yours. I had a beard. I wore a poncho. I was a hippie. I still go to Grateful Dead shows. I've seen them 146 times. My parents didn't like what I did. They didn't understand what I did. It wasn't too long ago. I stopped using drugs and drinking. So I was doing all the stuff. Unfortunately now, half the shit I had to quit doing is legal, which pisses me off. Right? So the problem is that there's folks like me who don't want to understand what you're all about. They don't want to take the time out. So you got to meet them halfway. And it starts out by doing some of the stuff you don't want to do. Like, anybody here watch the news? All right, more than usual. So you watch the news because nothing gets me off more than talking with somebody your age who can talk about something in the news and talk about it more than just the headline. And I don't care where you get your news. I don't care if you get it off of here and you get it from Reddit, or you get it from Fox News, or you get it from CNBC or Rolling Stone or Claire, whatever. I don't care, right? Because you need to get your news from multiple sources, or else you're just victim to one opinion. Start there. The other thing you need to start doing, and this is very practical advice, is to stand straight, sit straight with your shoulders back. This is science, people. You will get serotonin that way as well, right? Because that's you have to make a conscious decision to do that. How many people's mothers or fathers told them, sit straight, stand straight with your shoulders back, right? How am I doing? What time?
5:15.
Oh my goodness, I can ramble longer. So I left Hilton and I got to do this. I get to do this. I get to work with you guys. And you're awesome. And you ask questions. You're curious. Stay curious. I also get to do some of what I was doing at Hilton. I get to do consulting work. So I work with some of the owners who I liked working with when I was at Hilton. Like any job, there were people who I liked working with and I didn't like working with. And so now I have the luxury that I don't have to work with the people I didn't like working with. Right? It's like that t-shirt, mean people suck. Right? I don't have to deal with them anymore. Right? And that's another rule. If you got toxic people in your life, get rid of them. Get rid of them. You don't need those people around you. They're not going to lift you up. It's just, and you know who these people are. That when you get around them, you don't feel good when you leave them, or when you're around them, you find yourself doing things like gossiping, like blaming others for problems that it's not their fault. Very rarely is it somebody else's fault but your own, right? You're always the common denominator. So I'm no different than you guys. I hate thinking I caused the problem or that I did something that makes me feel bad, because I don't like to feel bad. None of us like to feel bad. And so I will avoid pain and discomfort at all costs. Here's an easy example, and some of you heard this morning. So my wife and I get up at 5 o'clock. Well, she gets up at 5 and I roll around a while. Because she wants to go walking. I don't like to walk in the morning at 5. So this morning it was cold, it was rainy, and so she gets up because she's a morning person, she's perky, she wants to talk about, like her first thing is like, hey, what are you going to do stuff with you? Hey, I got a list, I've been thinking about a list, and on my list it says make a list. And so she says to me, she's getting into her, cute walking clothes, because that's right, it's all about the cute outfits. So, but I hear the rain on the window, and I look at her, and I'm just like, can't we just lay in bed and move our legs? It's the same thing. And she said no. So she goes out on the balcony, and it's really raining, and she comes in, and she says, we can't go walking, it's raining. And so I'm 57 years old. Inside, I immediately become a 10-year-old who just found out he's got a snow day, right? Because I don't like discomfort, and there's other things that go with it, right? Because she doesn't like to listen to music when we walk. I want to listen to my music when I'm walking, because you know what she wants to do when we're walking? And what kind of question she's going to ask me?
What'd you do? What do you want to do?
Or worse yet, what are you thinking? So, we avoid discomfort. We avoid things that maybe even scare us, right? Anybody here think they have control issues? Oh, 4 people who are honest, and I think I talked about this before. So, I'm going to let you in on a secret, and maybe you know it, because maybe you've studied your control issues for a while, because you didn't just develop these control issues last week, right? No, you've had it for a while? Yeah, sure. So control is just fear in different clothes. That's all. I got to control this situation. I got to choke it. Because I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't. If I don't. What could possibly happen? And so once you come to terms with that, because at some point you got to let go, you got to recognize that control is an illusion, just like permanent security is, right? It's an illusion, right? So you live in the moment, you live in the day, everything's okay. I promise you right now, everything right now, right this moment, everything's okay. Oops. Everything right now is okay, right? And so when we start going and going and going, and I know that like in 3 years, or maybe in an hour, something's going to get you, and you're going to be thinking like, you just got to recognize that and say, okay, what am I really afraid of here if I don't control this? It's going to happen in your career. It's going to happen at work. Because, you know, you guys are early in this education and career thing, right? So it's okay if you change your mind, right? And don't know what you want to do, or start down the path and change your mind. It's okay. So don't get hung up on that. Don't get hung up on that. You know, I teach a lot of seniors too, and they're at this, I got to get that job. I got to get that job. You're going to change jobs probably a half dozen times in the first 10 years of your career. So the odds of you getting that job and staying anywhere for a really long time are slim. You know, look at all the jobs I had until I found Hilton in 1994. I mean, I started working, I worked for 10 years at a whole bunch of different places before I found Hilton. And it was only because I worked at a whole bunch of places that when I got to Hilton, I worked there for a few years, that I was able to say, you know what? This company's about as good as any that I've worked for, better than most, and I think this is as good a place to just stick around and take what they're dealing and put up with some shit, give some shit, and give them hell. And do the best that I can. And, that's why people stay at a place for 20 years or 30 years. Because they're willing to put up with some stuff, because it's not about being happy. It's not about bean bags and foosball tables and pool tables and free lunches. Those are all nice, but that's not why people stay at a place, or great benefits. It's about relationships and the people you're working with, and finding the nobility in what you do. You'll all get there. I know you will. I know you will. You just got to think about it. Make good choices and bad choices. My 27-year-old daughter tells me just about every time I hang up the phone with her, she goes, "Hey, Dad, make good choices today. Make good choices today." So, what kind of questions do you guys have? Yes?
So, what would you suggest for newcomers into the hospitality business? How to get their foot in the door?
Really good question. I'd pick a handful of places you want to work at, and I'd show up there with your resume and say, I really want to work here. Can you help me? Tell them straight up, I really want to work here. This looks like a place where I think I could really learn a lot, and I think I'd be a good employee. you know, we put too much dependence today on online job sites and submitting our resumes online. And, you know, that part of business has turned into a keyword search. You know, that's the way it works. It's just a keyword search. So unless you're changing your resume every time you submit it to a job to match the keywords that are in the job description and what they're looking for in qualifications, 50-50 that you're going to get to that next step. So you want to work at, let's just say, the Hampton Inn on Poplar. You take your resume and you walk up to the front desk and say, who do I talk to about a job because I want to work here? And if they say, fill out an application and leave us your resume, then you call them, if that's really where you think you want to work, and you do that for a few other places. It shows initiative, it shows drive. They get to see you. That's what I do today. It's what I did do, but I think it's still effective today. Good question. Yes.
So personally, I want to work in brand management, and specifically for Hilton, I've got a long time background with Hilton.
Mm-hmm.
If you could go back, what would you do to get specifically to a position like that? Would you change your sales position, or would you have went maybe more like with the customer service, or?
You know, I don't think there's any part of my experience that I would change because it all led me to that. So I think I had a healthy balance of operations and sales to help support other operators. Because I can tell you too that I had no idea. My goal in this business when I first started was to be a general manager of a big full service hotel, because that's all there was. That was the measure of success when I started. Now you have these options, so I think it's to gain as much experience as you can on a practical level in the field, get comfortable with the technology, understand things like revenue management, sales, and all that. And then network, right? Meet people through the alumni association, people like myself, other folks who have contacts at Hilton, and just network, pester, look at their website for jobs available, start letting them know who you are and what you're all about and why you want to be there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
What else do we have for Frank? No other questions? I know y'all. Yes, ma'am.
What was life like traveling to all those hotels? Was it easier or harder than you thought it would be?
It was harder. It was hard. At first, it seemed very glamorous and fun, right? You know, because you travel a lot. They put you in the front of the plane and all of that. But it didn't take more than a year or so before it became really hard. And it wasn't the part about being away from home. It was just the work of it, right? You had to get to an airport by a certain time. For the first 6 or 7 years of me traveling, it wasn't, right? That was before 2001. It was before 9/11. So traveling before 9/11 was fantastic. It was like driving a car into a parking lot. We used to play games, all of us who traveled. Who can get to the airport latest and still get on a flight? Because you could literally park in front of the airport and just sprint to the gate. There was no security. You had your ticket. So, but it was work. It was really work. It was a grind, right? You had to get there an hour early. You had to go through all the TSA. Then you had to get to a place where you didn't know your way around. And you had to find the hotel. And then you were by yourself a good portion of the time. So what did you do? And so it burns a lot of people out very quickly. It's not a healthy way to live either. You've got to really find some discipline when you're on the road to eat right, to exercise, because you're spending a lot of time sitting in meeting rooms. And if you don't do those things, eat right, exercise, I mean, all sorts of things can go wrong. You can't You know, so it's a grind. It really is a grind. But at first, and so then once you get to the point where you're eating right, you're exercising, then you can start to have fun again, right? But you got to learn through that little bit of a learning curve, and then it can be like, oh, I'm going to, you know, Anywheresville, USA. I want to see what is in Anywheresville, USA with my free time that makes Anywheres USA special. So I did get to see a lot of things that I would never have gotten to see, and experience a lot of things. But it took a while for me to get to that point where because you're exhausted at the end of the day too. You're sitting in a meeting room, you're talking to people, you're worn out. And so the idea of saying, okay, now I'm going to leave the hotel and go sightsee or do something, you know, you're like, screw it, I'm going to order some room service, I'm going to, you know, I'm going to go out for a few drinks, then come up or do whatever, do something unhealthy. Yeah. So it's what you make of it, but it's a tough road. And 20 years was good enough for me. I avoid. I drive more now. That's the ultimate of having no control whatsoever. Is flying. You have no control when you get to the airport. You have no, you know, once you're up in the plane.
Anything else for Frank? Well, let's hear it for him.
What's your favorite thing about hospitality that makes it all worth it for you?
And there's a bunch of things, but I can tell you, helping somebody solve a problem for them when they were at our hotel. If something was going wrong with their stay, solving any kind of a problem for them. You know, you see the commercials all the time of the kid who leaves a stuffed animal behind, or all of those things, but it was being there to help them. And it happens on so many different levels. When you're in sales, it happens, you're providing a solution for a company or for a group, but it all stems from problem solving and working with another. That's all part of the nobility I was able to find. And getting to meet new people every day, and not having 2 days. You want a job where no 2 days are the same, hospitality is absolutely the right gig for you. Yeah. That's what I dug about it. Working, when I got moved to Memphis, and I had to work in an office for a while, and like be in an office, you know, and people would come in and sit in my office and want to shoot the breeze and all that sort of stuff. I was like, what is this? I don't feel like I'm in hospitality. I feel like I'm in an office. I feel like my dad. And then I got to get out on the road.
Thanks, Frank.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.